This interview was originally recorded on October 24th, 2023. Welcome to Everyone Eats. I'm Jeremy Bowditch. Today we're talking about debt. What is debt? Personal responsibility? Moral obligation? Profit scheme for the ruling class? We're going into debt to finance our basic needs. Medical debt, rent debt, bail debt. What about student debt? How many college graduates do you know that can afford their student loan payments? How many people do you know that cried tears of joy when Biden forgave their student loans, only to cry again when the Supreme Court unforgave them? If we believe everyone should have equitable access to education as a basic need, why are students being punished with hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt? What if I told you college was free in California until the 1970s? From 1868 to 1978, any California resident, mostly white males, admitted to a University of California campus paid nothing in tuition. But the good times came to an end when women and black people demanded a seat at the table. This is a running theme on our show, as our guest in episode 2, Gina Viola, called out when talking about healthcare.
When we finally did get Medicare, do you know why we got Medicare? Civil rights movement, right? Because Black folks demanded it. But when we wrote the program for it, there was an 80-20 split. 20% of Medicare wasn't going to be covered. This was so Black folks wouldn't be able to afford that 20%. White folks went along with that, knowing that they would suffer as well. 20% wasn't going to be covered for them either.
Sound familiar? Another case of anti-Blackness trading a short-term racist win for long-term suffering of society at large. That same anti-Blackness would surface again in the late 1960s when a Los Angeles County Superior Court lawsuit lit the fuse on a class showdown. John Serrano, representing public school kids and their parents, versus Ivy Baker Priest, the California State Treasurer. Serrano v. Priest made it to the California Supreme Court. Amazingly, the court decided to realize the promise of the civil rights movement and integration by redistributing property taxes, the principal source of public school funding, from affluent neighborhoods to low-income neighborhoods. The backlash was swift. In 1978, Prop 13 passed by a 2-to-1 margin in the zeitgeist of Reagan-era tax revolts. Homeowners, angry at sharing with the working poor, renters, and non-white people, panicked. Property tax was locked at 1%, pushing the tax burden of homeowners onto the rest of California. Billions in public funding evaporated overnight. This class warfare killed the engine for California's education budget. Funding for public schools, from kindergarten to college, never recovered, creating the perpetual budget crisis we're still living in today. For the UC system, that was the end of free tuition. 100 years ago, the state funded 75% of the UC budget. Today, it's around 15%. In 1985, UC in-state tuition was $1,300, or $3,900 in today's money. That's a part-time summer job. College, paid for by a 3-month part-time job. But now it's 2024, and the average in-state cost, all in, for a year of UC education is $42,000. That's a year of full-time work if you're lucky. So there you have it. College was free in California, until it wasn't. I wonder what was going on around the late 1960s that would have inspired such a dramatic change. Civil rights, women's liberation. What would Los Angeles look like if everyone had access to free education? What is a world without student loan debt? We believe a person's right to their basic needs is greater than anyone's right to make a profit. Free healthcare, free education, public housing, fair wages, a world without police or prisons. It's all possible if we fight for it together. Each episode, we open a bottle of wine and take a look at a basic need for all Angelenos. Who has it? Who goes without? Why? And what could we do about it? I talk to activists, educators, advocates, and people just trying to make ends meet. Join me, Jeremy Bowditch, as we imagine a Los Angeles where everyone eats. My guest today is Dr. Richelle Brooks, educator, school principal, and debt organizer with the Debt Collective. She's advocating for the abolition of debt, carceral, medical, student, and rent debt. Occupy Wall Street pointed out the inequity. Debt Collective and abolitionists are pointing to the solution. Everyone Eats is inspired by the Los Angeles Tenants Union, a diverse tenant-led movement fighting for the human right to housing for all, demanding safe, affordable housing, and universal rent control. To get involved in the union, start attending the meetings of the local chapter nearest you. Find out more at latenantsunion.org. Welcome back to Everyone Eats. I'm your host, Jeremy Bowditch. Joining me in studio today, we have an educator, we have a doctor. She's got lessons, so don't catch a lesson. She's with the Debt Collective. She's pushing for the end of student debt. She's pushing for relief. She's pushing for action. In the studio with me right now, joining me live, Dr. Richelle Brooks. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
I was so interested to talk to you, not only about your experience. I first saw an article talking about how you went from just one of the millions who are student loan debtors, I guess, to one of the people kind of advocating for some change, right? Pushing for, I think, federal student loan forgiveness. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how did you come to this work, right? Like, I know you're with the Debt Collective now, but what kind of pushed you from someone should do something about this to, well, shit, why don't I actually step in here and see if I can get active? What was that moment for you like?
I guess it started back when I was in high school, kind of navigating what was to come. I didn't have a lot of guidance about what was next. My mom wasn't there my mom was there, a single parent household, right? But she did not have the experience with going to college. So I was kind of in it on my own. And I was like, it just didn't feel like I was doing it the right way. A lot of mistakes. And then when I got to college, the first thing that they did was set me in the financial aid office, and they gave me all these loan documents, and they were like, hey, fill this out. This is how you're going to pay for school. And I was like, can you explain this to me? And it was just very procedural, not a lot of explanation with it. So it always left a bad taste in my mouth. And then got through college, ended up pregnant, having a couple of kids, and I got my first student loan payment. And I was like, this is exactly what I feared, right? I was doing what I thought I should do, going to college, making a better life for me and my kids, doing what a lot of people in my family hadn't done yet. First generation college graduate, graduated with a bachelor's, a master's, another master's, teaching credential.
Wow.
Yeah, and then a doctorate. But in between all of that, I got my first student loan payment. And I was like, this is bullshit. If you're doing everything the right way, if you're doing everything that you should be doing to, at that point, as a young mother, take care of your kids, why do I have to pay for it? And I'm an educator, right? So It just felt terrible, right? So I don't think I was necessarily politicized yet, but the personal feelings were there. So I just started posting on Facebook. I was like, hey guys, I got my student loan debt payment. It's due. I'm not paying it. Who else is not paying it? And people are like, what are you talking about? You have to pay it. And I'm like, well, let's figure out how we don't pay it. And that lasted for about 4 or 5 years. And then finally somebody found me and they read the book Can't Pay, Won't Pay, which is written by the founders of the Debt Collective. And they're like, you have to read this. This is going to explain everything that you feel. And yes, that's exactly what it did. It explained everything that I felt. And I was like, I feel like my personal experiences prepared me to be who I am today, to take on the challenges to make a difference in a multitude of ways. Student loan debt is one, but it's because I know what I experienced, and I know people that look like me. You guys can't see me. I'm a Black woman. People that look like me and come from where I'm from, single-parent households, first-generation college graduates, we have those same experiences. They're predatory. We feel it. We may not have the language to articulate what the problem is. But once I found that language, I knew that it was my duty, it was my responsibility to speak up for people that look like me.
It sounds like you were doing just knee-jerk organizing without any playbook or anything. Just that was your first instinct, was let me talk to people I know and see if anyone else feels the same way.
That's exactly it. Yeah. And I didn't have an organizing background. It was literally just my lived experiences and connecting with folks that had the same lived experiences as me and talking about what we can do about it. But then I was connected to the Debt Collective, they're dope with their organizing strategies. So now I'm learning more about being an organizer. But yeah, it just started with knee-jerk reaction of let's do something because we have to make a change.
We don't like the way things are. What can be done about it? Well, let's find out. I love that. I love
Exactly.
that. We have a little ritual we do on the show where we open a bottle of wine and we have a little sip because we believe that things that are public, things that are generated, created by our shared resources don't have to be bad. We think the idea that public education, public library, public transportation, public housing, our ideas that these are nasty, gross things only used by people who are failing, we reject that hard, right? We think that the best things that are available in this life could be experienced by most of us, if not all of us, if we just shared our resources maybe a little more fairly. But also, we are fans of sipping on fine wines. So the grapes in this bottle of dry Gewürztraminer from Sonoma Valley come out of the ground, right? This is an agricultural product, right?
Okay.
This is something going out of the ground for free. But somehow, the people who labor to pick this fruit, right? The people that sweat to drive the forklift, all the workers who are involved in the production of this, because of how we've decided to organize our society, aren't able to enjoy the literal fruits of their labor. The train can be free and it can be clean,
Absolutely.
right? The library can be incredibly well-resourced and let anyone in. It's not either or. And to that end, we're going to get into a little something
All right.
right here and now. So let me pour this up for you.
Thank you. Toast.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. That is zippy. Did the idea of having to take on additional debt and or how am I going to pay for this, did that factor into your decision to either stay in school or pull out of school or how much school to do? How much impact did that have on your kind of journey from freshman undergrad through postgraduate?
Yeah, I think that's a part of the point of it being predatory is because that message wasn't relayed to me throughout the process. It was kind of at the end of it all is when I received the notice from the bursar's office, is when they were like, hey, all of those things that we had you sign, now it's time to pay back. My ideas and kind of conceptualization of what that was throughout college was I'm going into public service. So when I'm taking on these student loans, the federal government loves me. They love public servants.
Right.
So I'm taking on the student loan debt, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to have to pay it back because all I have to do is work 10 years in public service and all of that's going to be forgiven.
Yes.
So that was my understanding of it throughout my college. Now, once I graduated and I got that first bill, it did impact the way that I approach college. So I realized that I wanted to stay in school because when you're in school, you're not making student loan payments, right? So I'm staying in school. And in addition to not having to make student loan payments by staying in school, I'm also able to earn more if I stay in school. So I wasn't making enough as a teacher. Teachers in LA barely make a livable wage. I was a single mom with 2 kids, so it wasn't something that I could afford to do.
So you were in school while working.
Correct.
Not only because you want more education, but also to avoid being in repayment, to avoid being on some sort of schedule paying these loans back.
Exactly. I knew that I couldn't pay them. At that time, I didn't know of any other option. It was just to stay in school. So in turn, I stayed in school and was able to earn a little bit more. And as I earned more, the cost of living, of course, increases as well. That inability to pay did not change. I still couldn't afford to pay the student loans, so I just kept staying in school. So yeah, it definitely impacted my educational journey because it extended it beyond where it may have been. Had I graduated when I was a teacher and was able to go out into the field and work without having to struggle financially, perhaps I wouldn't have had to stay in school and I may have been able to pay student loans. But because I wasn't able to in that moment, I definitely had to stay in school an additional 4 or 5 years.
Can you talk to me a little bit about debt? Right. I kind of just want to ask you the question, like, what is debt? And not the kind of direct brush off answer, which is, oh, well, some generous capitalist, right, outlaid some cash for you, and now you're exploiting them, and you better pay them back plus interest. Okay, we know what that is. But just conceptually, what is debt? What does that mean? What is that relationship? What's it doing to us? What is debt?
I think the first word that comes to mind is enslavement. It's intentional extraction of resources from the individual to fuel the capitalistic society, right? If you're continually extracting resources from folks, they have to continue to produce. They have to continue to go to work. They cannot stop producing because then that means they don't survive, right? If they have to pay you, right? We're financing education. We're financing, Instacart has financing groceries now where you can pay $25 a month to get groceries.
And just for the record, when we say financing, that's like a euphemism for borrowing money.
You're borrowing money.
And paying extra money on top for the privilege.
Correct.
We'll be right back with debt abolitionist Dr. Richelle Brooks. Everyone Eats is inspired by the People's Budget LA, a coalition convened by Black Lives Matter Los Angeles, including community organizations, faith leaders, parents, teachers, students, nonprofit leaders, and individuals from across Los Angeles protesting the city's outsized funding of LAPD. How would you spend the people's money? Take the survey at peoplesbudgetla.com. Welcome back to Everyone Eats. Let's hear more of my conversation with debt abolitionist Dr. Richelle Brooks. What was your experience with the, I don't know, not the threats, but payback or else? Or maybe even what are the fears you're hearing when you first get on Facebook and you say, hey, these student loan repayments are gnarly. I'm not about to do that. I'm still in school. This makes no damn sense. What was communicated to you by Sally Mae, whoever, Mohila, whoever's coming after you on these loans? What's that bayonet in your back that's got you to say, if I don't pay this?
Right. Oh, I think just the term debt, right? Just having debt, the idea of having debt, it's a really shameful and isolating concept in our society. It's intended to make the individual feel like they did something wrong. It's a moral irresponsibility, right? You failed in some type of way because you have this amount of debt. And I think with me being so vocal about it and telling my story, people are like, you're okay with saying you have $237,000 of student loan debt? And I'm like, yeah, I'm okay with that because I know it's not a moral failing, right? I didn't do anything wrong. Literally, when I tell my story, a part of that is I did everything that I was supposed to do and still something went wrong, right? Because it's a systemic failure.
Yes.
So highlighting the fact that it's a systemic failure makes all of the difference. And then we're not individuals in this fight. When we isolate ourselves, it makes us more vulnerable to whatever it is that they want to do about the student loan debt, about any debts, right? Any form of debt. The power lies within the bank. If you owe the bank $10,000, the bank has a lot of leverage over you, right? But if you collectively work together with everybody that owes the bank, then you, in fact, own that bank because $10,000, they can come after you. $100 million, that's a big difference. If we default on $10,000, it's a problem for us. If we default on $100 million, it's a problem for them. So that's where the idea of being vocal about everything on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, wherever I am, even in person, I'm really vocal about it because I know that there's collective power. When we come together, we can literally flop the system on its head, right? We can abolish this idea that we're individuals that did something wrong and funnel and direct the energy towards the people who are in the wrong, the capitalists that are profiting off of the predatory loan terms, the capitalists that are profiting off of the predatory practices for people who are in the position where they have to finance their survival, their medication, their education, their food, right? That system itself should not exist. So when we talk about it, we come to that realization that it's not us that did something wrong. It's the system that did something wrong. And I don't get terrified, right? I get motivated. I'm like, this is what it takes, y'all. Huh? Like we get that bill and we go tell somebody else. They tell us they got their bill and we organize and we get stronger. So I strike. I haven't made a student loan payment yet.
Yes, say it again.
Yeah. And Am I fearful? Absolutely not. I know that there's power in what I'm doing, and I know I'm on the right side of history. 15, 20 years from now, we're going to be having conversations about, wow, 15, 20 years ago, people were expected to go into debt for education, and people are going to be like, that's so unjust, because we're having these conversations now and because people are choosing to not pay. So there's consequences oftentimes, but with the Debt Collective, one of the things that we do is we show people how to strike without going into default, right? So the way that I did it, which I spoke about earlier, I stayed in school, and you don't have to pay while you're in school. You can declare that you're on strike. And I did it intentionally because of my inability to pay. Right now, I'm not in school. Payments just started, but I'm on disability. I just had a baby. Y'all, had a baby 5 weeks ago.
Congrats.
Thank you. So I'm on disability, and I don't have to pay because my income is so low right now. I make 60% of what I was making. I reapplied for my income-driven repayment plan, and my payment is $0, right? So you apply for IDR, you get that $0 payment. That means you're not making any monthly payments. You're striking. Whenever you're not making payments, declare that you are striking. Let the government know you're not paying these student loans back, and organize with other folks. It doesn't have to be scary. It can be empowering. It can be uplifting. But the important part is that we come together as a collective, because they want to isolate us, right? They want you to get that letter and be fearful. They want you to feel shame. They want you to feel like it's your fault, right? That's not true. When you get that letter, feel motivated, feel empowered, understand that there's resources, there's people behind a movement to cancel and abolish student loan debt, and we're getting closer to it. And there are consequences, right? You can go into default. You can have your credit affected by it. It can affect your ability to pay for things or finance things, really, right? So there is that side that people need to know about, but there are ways to avoid default and affecting your credit, and you can still strike with us.
I love hearing that. It's a intentional strike. You know, I see that sentiment on social media often, which is, it's outrageous. $120K for dental assistant school. That's bullshit. It's not paying that back. And people are like, how dare you? That's crazy. And there's like some methods to the madness. We're talking about A, letting the lender know, the government, whoever, I'm not paying this back, I'm on strike. But then B, using the available processes and tools to kind of avoid entering into the system. I was talking to someone earlier about housing, an eviction court, and they were saying something similar, right? That the point is to not end up in the legal process of eviction. It sounds like what you're describing when you're on strike is you want to avoid the kind of legal, carceral, punitive issues that come with debt, right? Staying out of default. Can you talk to me a little bit about how...
Worst case scenario.
Yeah,
right?
what's the threat, right? What is... If the system works as designed,
yeah,
what does it do to the individual?
Yeah, and whenever we think about consequences, if it affects the average person in any type of way, it's going to affect poor people. It's going to affect Black people. It's going to affect working class, queer folks. It's going to affect already marginalized people even more, right? And those are the people that, especially in this space, that we're working to protect. We want to make sure that folks aren't making their situation worse. So yes, absolutely. I think worst case scenario, you default on your student loans. It affects your credit, right? It shows up on your credit report. When you go to finance anything, they look at that and you can't get any type of financing. It can affect if you already have financing, right? There's times where they review your credit regularly just to see your credit worthiness. And if they see that you've defaulted, then it can affect your credit worthiness in that moment. And they can pull back what has already been financed. I've seen it happen where someone had a car, they defaulted on something, and they were able to take away their car, right? They repoed their car because their credit worthiness dropped. And there's predatory car companies too who aren't doing things by the book. And that happens. Or their payments go up because their credit terms change. Their loan terms change because of the credit worthiness, which if something's getting more expensive, but your pay is staying the same, right? You're not going to be able to pay it, right? So you start to fall behind and things just snowball out of control. I've had someone yesterday, 2 days ago, I'm going on a walk with my friend. She's in the IT business and she's like, I can't pay my student loans, but I can't go into default because when I get contracts for my job, the first question they ask me is, am I in default for student loans? So the government contracts for any position, and she's a single mom, she's a Latina woman, right? You're getting government contracts, which is your livelihood is based on being able to attain these government contracts. You can't pay your bills. You can't survive without this job. They're asking you if you've defaulted on your student loans, right? So yeah, it's impactful. We don't want people to go that route. It can destroy their entire lives, their ability to survive. I've never been in default. I've always figured out a way to avoid it. But what I can say is when I do get that student loan payment itself, the anxiety-inducing experience is something that's debilitating. And it was something that I couldn't stop thinking about. So I think about other people who have compounded, right, responsibilities, health issues, needing medical care, all of that compounds, and it threatens your livelihood. So yeah, that's something that we want to avoid, but also we want to highlight the ways in which it does affect folks, because it shouldn't be this way, right? It shouldn't be, I'm going to school, I'm going into public service to serve my community, and these could be the effects of that. That could be the consequence of that. I could not ever own a home because I could potentially default on a student loan. I could never get a government contract because I could potentially default on a student loan, right? These are all possibilities that should never happen. And that's why we're organizing. We want education to be free. I don't want my kids having to navigate, do I default on my student loan or do I pay for hysterectomy, right? Those choices shouldn't have to be made, right? We should be able to get medical care and we should be able to get an education. Everyone eats.
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone eats. And those aren't things that we should have to navigate to figure out.
You must have done some napkin math. What would it cost retail for both of your children, full education in their fields of interest, right? So like, obviously, if they want to be a painter, that's way cheaper than I want to be like a board certified brain doctor, but like just off the top of your head, what do you think retail costs would be on those educations for both your children if we don't change anything?
Oh, worse. I have 238. I just checked yesterday with interest. 238,000 of student loan debt. It would be worse than that.
Wow.
My daughter wants to be an anesthesiologist. She wants to go to Ivy League.
Okay.
So her alone, several $100,000.
Wow. Just one child.
Yeah, just one child. My son, not so much with the ambitious goals. He does want to be a computer scientist.
Okay.
Yeah. So he won't set me back hundreds
Right.
of thousands, but tens of thousands. I
Yeah.
would say probably about 70, 80. And the push for him is to do a local state school to get it as inexpensive as possible. So them combined, and I just had a third baby. 18 years from now, who knows what education will look like, right? I can't even predict. But for my two oldest, in the next 3-4 years, I would say at least $300,000-$400,000 total.
Wow. And the way our system is set up, at least I got this message. You tell me how you're a parent of kids who are looking at school now, college now. Are they still getting the message that a college education is essential if you want to have any sort of shot of upward mobility, if you want to be earning your maximum potential? Is that message, are they still getting that in school? Do they still get the sense that if I don't go to college, my life's going to be more difficult? Is that still being taught?
Yeah, I'm an educator too. So I think it's both, right? In some neighborhoods, it's being taught that you go to college. I think in some, it's get a trade, go to trade school, and you can make a way. What I teach my kids is I want them to get a college degree, right? I think I've had an experience as an adult without a college degree, and I've had experiences as an adult with a college degree. And even knowing everything that I know about how expensive college is, I think it's worth it. I don't know if there's upward mobility, right, necessarily attached to having that college degree because of the predatory nature of the system and intergenerational setbacks for Black folks. Mm-hmm. But I do think the things that I've learned are invaluable. Without college, I wouldn't be an organizer. I wouldn't have been able to politicize my lived experiences in the ways that I have. College is an experience to learn who you are. I think that's something that's underestimated with college. You're learning about who you are as a person. You're learning how to navigate the world with different skill sets. You're learning about the entire world as opposed to just your neighborhood. People should be able to go and get that education. And that's something that I instill in my kids. College is not just about the degree, right? Education doesn't have to lead to productivity.
Say it again, please.
It should be an individual experience for that person. It doesn't have to be directly tied into how are you going to produce.
More of my conversation with Dr. Richelle Brooks after this. Everyone Eats is inspired by J-Town Action and Solidarity, a grassroots collective dedicated to revolutionary organizing and building community power in Little Tokyo. Follow them on Instagram at J-Town Action and learn more at jtownaction.com. Let's get back into it with Dr. Richelle Brooks. What would it mean for Angelenos, people who live in the city, live in the county, people in the region, if anyone who lives here, if they wanted to, could have as much school as they want? That means at 16, you're out of school because now you've got your home networking certification and you're out here just wiring doorbell cams. Great. Or maybe you stay in school to get like a post PhD to invent some new physics, frankly, that no one's interested in yet, right? Like both of those are on the table. Well, how does that transform society? How does that transform how we move through the world?
I think you said it, right? You're given time to think beyond what's possible. You're creating things that don't exist already because you have the time to do that. You're not focused on a product. You're invested in the process of learning, and that breeds innovation. Being able to focus on in the moment and just living and thriving in the moment really is what breeds innovation, not capitalism. And I feel like what you're describing is like a socialist utopia where folks are pursuing their passions. Like, imagine that. If everybody in LA was able to pursue their passions, just what that would feel like. We do a lot of talking about the numbers, the figures, quantifying things. But sometimes we need to hone in and focus on what it feels like. And when we think about people being able to pursue their passions, just in my household alone, we get up, we go to work, we're upset with each other when we get home, we're tired, it feels like a rat race. I imagine that I can learn, I can do that without having to go into debt. I can go to the beach during the day. I can pay for groceries. I have all of my dreams, right, actualized because education is free, because it's not tied to productivity. I think that makes me a better person. I think that makes me a better mom. I think it makes me a better partner. That's what we see. We see the world change little by little because people are happier. We see them more fulfilled. Given the opportunity to go to college and learn a skill and learn a practice and learn a trade for free, it opens up the door for folks to solve problems that haven't been solved. It opens up the door to create things that haven't been created. And that benefits society as a whole. And then also having an informed, learned, educated populace serves everybody. We can make informed decisions about what Los Angeles should be. When education is free, it benefits everybody.
So going on strike at your job, right, that is, I'm not doing anything until my demands are met. How does a debt strike work, right? Like, what is the lever? What's the mechanism that you can use in a debt strike that the debt collective is using for abolition?
In regards to student loan debt, the people that we're up against are quite literally the federal government. And the way that we're combating the federal government is, one, like I said, through the paradigm shifts, getting folks to understand and mobilize with the idea that education should be free. When we're talking and having conversations with the Department of Ed, We want to make sure that public service loan forgiveness applications are successful. People that are in public service, 99% of those applications have been denied in the past. So when we see those denial of applications, it gives the falsehood that you working in your communities is actually going to change the fact that the student loan debt exists. We want income-driven repayment plans to be successful. Again, in the past, a lot of those applications just fell through the cracks. We have people in our 50 for 50 group who are like, hey, I've been paying all my student loans. I'm a public servant, been paying for 25 years, and I've never received anything about public service loan forgiveness because there wasn't a process for that. There was nothing. So the Department of Ed has very shifty policies and processes around student loan debt that need to be remedied. So on our journey to complete abolition and complete education for all for free, those are some of the things that we're fighting for. We're fighting for equitable policies. We're ensuring that the applications that are intended to get people free of these student loans are actually working. We're ensuring that the student loan servicers, so you have Mohila, you have Nelnet, they're the servicers for the federal government. They manage the files, essentially. They're doing the administrative work. We're ensuring that they are actually following the policies that are put into place. They go rogue often and do whatever the hell they want. They don't answer the phone. We're seeing it happen now. They're sending the wrong amount, so people are overpaying or underpaying and then getting penalties for it. So there's a multitude of people that we're up against. We're up against the servicers. We're up against the Department of Ed and then the federal government as a whole. But what can they do? If everybody owes them, that's the idea of a strike, right? We see it in the labor movement. You are upholding the system. Once you stop upholding that system, it doesn't exist anymore. So if every single borrower goes on strike, that's exactly what we're going to see. We're going to see the federal government have to address this crisis. That's the goal of it. We have the power to make demands. And that demand is going to be cancellation of the student loan debt that exists and ultimately education being free. And there's nothing they can do. They can't come after every single person. They don't have the leg power to do it, right? They're just physically, they can't do it. But then also, we have the collective power. So we strike, we win. That's exactly it.
I want to ask you, during the COVID response here in Los Angeles, what did you learn about what's possible with government meeting people's needs? What did you see that changed? What stuck around? What didn't change? Did you get any ideas? What was your experience like during the pandemic when it comes to people's needs being met from the government or our collective resources?
I think it's possible, right? Anything is possible if you want to do it. We saw the world come to a halt. And when the world came to a halt, everybody was given what they needed to survive. If you need food from school, you don't have to pay, right? That was national. Kids could just pull up and grab their lunch and get their needs met. We were able to get money, right? Stimulus payments. That made a difference for hundreds of millions of people. There's room in the budget. I think that became apparent. There's room in the budget, there's flexibility, and the government can make these decisions. We can provide to meet the needs of the people. Because health threatened capitalism, because health threatened profits, it became a focus. And we had to keep people at home. In order to keep people at home, we had to keep them fed. We had to provide health care. People could go get vaccines for free. People were going to see the doctor for free. Schools were given money to keep people safe. We had PPP loans for businesses to meet the needs of their employees. We had a socialistic society for 2 years, right? And then 2 years later, we're back to where we began. So it's possible. We just need to redo budgets.
Yeah, let's say you are a debtor. You want to organize. Maybe you're not ready for a rent strike or a debt strike. What can people do? What progress is being made? How is your organizing having an effect on the systems currently in place?
Well, I think there's different ways to answer that question. Just some history. The Debt Collective in about 2015 were approached by these 15 students from Corinthians College, for-profit school. They were defrauded by their school. And they were like, hey, same as me, this doesn't feel right.
Mm-hmm.
Can you guys just come take a look and basically just give some guidance? So Debt Collective met with the Corinthian 15, and they were like, absolutely, this is a fraud case. You know, you've been defrauded by your institution. Those 15 people go on strike. The Debt Collective creates this toolkit. It's called the Defense to Repayment Tool. It was phenomenal. It was so phenomenal that the Department of Ed actually adopted it. So when anybody is defrauded by their for-profit institution, they're given this application and it allows them to get their money back. That history is important because that's what the Debt Collective does really well. We're able to abolish debt by understanding how banks, corporations are not following the law and holding them accountable, right? So we just created a tool. It's called the Release My Student Debt Tool. And the goal of it is to have as many people as we can get to sign it. Corinthian 15 had 15 people strike, declare that they can't pay, that they were defrauded by this process, and they won. They were able to get their money back. The idea of this tool is for folks to sign it. Hopefully, we get the numbers that the Department of Ed is like, okay, they're serious about this. They have enough people that if they don't pay this, then it bankrupts the system anyways. So we need to figure out a way to avoid that, right? We need to go about it in a way that resolves the issue as opposed to being reactionary, right? We want to be proactive. So we're aiming to get everybody to sign it and declare that they're on strike. And that affects things at the federal level. It'll hopefully open up the idea that education should be free by abolishing student loan debt. But when I think about California and LA more specifically, I think we do the same thing, right? We organize and we bring awareness to the issues and the experiences that people have. We fit it into our budgets to pay for school. I'm a tax-paying person. The money that I pay taxes for, I want it to go to something that I support. During the pandemic, school lunch was free to everybody. California continued that, right? School lunch is free for all students. We have the California Promise now, where students can go to school and they can go to community college for free after they graduate high school.
Nice.
Yeah. These are the things, they're incremental, but they make a difference, right? There's slight shifts in the paradigm. There's slight shifts in the ideology. And I think that's the biggest uphill battle, especially talking about and organizing within education, is getting people to understand that this is a public good. This is something that you deserve simply by existing. This is not something that you have to earn. And once that idea is changed, we see the incremental growth towards education for all. California Promise, fully throughout for 4 years. That's what I want to see.
And right now we're at 2 years for community college.
Correct.
We could expand California Promise to 4 years so you could get a 4-year degree.
Exactly.
At no cost to the student.
Exactly. And that's just education. Debt Collective does work in other ways as well, not just education. So we have household debt in general, right? It's not just educational student loan debt. We have debt due to inability to pay rent, right? You're facing eviction because you can't pay rent. So we created a tool for that as well. We have the Tenant Power Toolkit.
Wow.
Which allows people to address their eviction process and gets them the support that they need throughout the eviction process to fight it, hopefully to stay in their home and organize throughout. We have weekly meetings for folks to organize within the LA Tenants Union as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
We just had the LA Tenants Union on the show.
Did you?
We did, and I was hearing like whispers of it throughout our entire conversation. And so for us to just be back here where it's, hey, landlord.
Yep.
I'm staying.
Exactly.
I love to hear it.
Exactly. So with numbers, there's power, right? So that's the point of all of these toolkits, is to generate numbers and to get folks to understand that we're not going anywhere. So that's exactly it. Tell your landlord, I'm not leaving, and this is the legal process that I'm going to take. And there's power in that. They get terrified when they see that you know what you're talking about. We have a great legal team behind all of these tools. So yeah, we're fighting rent debt. And then we're also There's new terrain with medical debt. So it's in development, but LA has some opportunities to organize around folks being able to afford health care.
Right.
And then also carceral debt. About 1 million people in California have bail debt.
Right.
And that's something that we don't want to see. Obviously, it's a special kind of predatory when you're put under imprisonment against your own will and you have to go into debt for it, right? And your family has to go into debt for your imprisonment.
Right. Before trial, let's be clear.
Before.
Right? This is before trial.
Yeah, bail debt is pre-trial. You're not convicted of anything. You're not guilty. So yeah, different tools, doing things at national levels that allow us to organize in California and allow us to mobilize and build power locally as well.
Dr. Brooks has mentioned these toolkits a couple times now. Essentially, if you go to debtcollective.org on their website, it's a questionnaire. You answer a few questions, it takes in information, and then gives you some next steps. Maybe it's a program you didn't know about, maybe it's a form, maybe it's a number to call, maybe it's a letter to write. They have these toolkits for rent debt, medical debt, student debt, carceral debt. Check them out at debtcollective.org. Just the act of saying out loud in a crowded space, hey, I don't think we should be paying interest on the things that we need to be alive. Having that conversation on the national level, state level, whatever, in our homes, our communities, workplaces, just shifting that conversation then gives cover for the policy. You're saying the policy, we know how and what it can do, right? The studies have been done. The social science has been done.
Right.
The question is, like you're saying, convincing people that it is a public good. So before I let you go, on this show, we say that we're not going to have a conversation with someone about whether or not people who are currently living outside deserve to live. I don't know. Should we let them starve? Should they bring them inside? We're not having that conversation, right? What's your pitch for someone who maybe is having a little trouble wrapping their mind around the idea of a public good?
It doesn't matter what it is that you want to do. If you want to be an artist, if you want to be an anesthesiologist, if you want to be a guitarist, it doesn't matter what you want to be. You as an individual, as a human, deserve to be able to learn that. We made up college costing. That's not something that existed. We just made that up. Just like we made up college having a cost and having to finance it, we can reinvent something completely different, right? We want to eliminate the struggle to be able to get educated. We don't want your education to be tied to the system. We want to reimagine something new and focusing on your personal development and your growth. And that's what you deserve as a human being just by being born. That's it.
The compassion is crazy. Dropping the Buddhism right now. I'm loving that. You're saying we are good. We deserve just by being here.
You deserve just by being here, but also you taking part benefits everybody else. I think that's a big piece too. That's what makes it a public good, a reparative public good, right? When you're better for yourself, you're better for everyone else.
Right.
And I really don't want to think of it in terms of productivity. I want to take that away from education in and of itself. When white men were the ones that were going to college, we knew that education was a public good. It was free. This country knew they wanted all white men educated, right? But as soon as it became sites where Black and brown folks, were women, were folks that we don't want to be educated, it became a site of radicalization and politicization. We don't want these things. So then the concept of school completely changes to, okay, now it's send people to school so that they can graduate and go get jobs, right? So we need to reimagine this idea of productivity tied to education in and of itself. You deserve knowledge, right? You deserve the ability to learn, and you deserve the skills because you're here. And you being able to attain those things will also benefit everybody else in the world, in your family, in your community, in the world as a whole.
I love that, Richelle. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us.
No problem at all.
This was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
The end of debt, free college, free healthcare, free housing. It's all available if we fight for it together. Thanks so much to Dr. Richelle Brooks for coming on the show. You can learn more about her work with the Debt Collective at debtcollective.org. You can follow Debt Collective on Instagram at The Debt Collective and the Los Angeles chapter at det_collective_LA. Thank you for listening to Everyone Eats. The show is hosted by me, Jeremy Bowditch. I'm also a producer on the show. So is Joy Sanford and Dan Gallucci. The show is recorded at Boyle Heights Beat in Boyle Heights, Los Angeles, California. Follow the show on social media at Everyone Eats LA and our website, everyoneeats.la.